What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another weekly updates. There's lots of exciting news to go over here this week. Of course, the biggest debuts happened at the New York Auto Show this week, and I was there to cover it all. I will include the link to the playlist at the end of this video of all the New York reveals that I covered if you want to get caught up on those and you missed those earlier this week. So that's all, the big stuff, but there's been also lots of other news here this week. But before I get into the news, I first want to mention I'll be doing my usual weekly live stream here on Sunday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So join if you can. It's always a fun time hanging out and talking cars with all of you. But the one vehicle I didn't get a chance to cover here at the New York Auto Show was the 2026 Volkswagen Tiguan SEL R-Line Turbo, which from here on out I'm going to be calling the Tiguan Turbo. I don't know why they gave it this cluttered name, but anyway. We already saw the new Gen 2025 Tiguan back in the fall, but now this new top trim gives the Tiguan a nice boost in performance to better compete with stuff like the Mazda CX-5 Turbo. It continues to run the EA888 2-liter turbo 4-cylinder, but it gets 67 more horsepower and 51 more pound-feet of torque, now at 268 horsepower and 258 pound-feet of torque, and that's also on regular gas, not premium like the Mazda requires for its 250 horsepower. The Tiguan gets the extra power from a bigger turbo, running more boost, and supporting mods like new pistons, connecting rods, crankshaft, intercooler, and more. It doesn't sound like they did anything to the suspension or handling whatsoever, but there are new 20-inch wheels and a black roof as standard on the turbo. And so yeah, I guess they figured, if it works for Mazda, it can work for them. Just give it more power and leave it at that. And so this faster version is going to be arriving this fall, and pricing will be announced closer to that. But, really great to see that, and hopefully, pricing isn't too crazy for that one. But moving on here, Auto Express has talked with Subaru's European brand manager, who's, I guess, at the New York Auto Show, interestingly enough, this week, but talked to him about the future of STI. And it sounds like it might not have a future at all. So he did say, we need to bring sportiness back to Subaru, especially in Europe, where there is no WX or BRZ. Those both got cut off by emissions regulations. But if they do bring back sportiness because of the emissions regulations in Europe, it won't be from anything gas powered. So if they were to do something, it'll be electric. And he said it's not decided yet whether a potential new performance model would even wear an STI badge. Or whether it would be branded as STE instead, with that name actually getting trademarked back in 2023 in Germany, and giving us a little bit of a preface of what may be in the deliberations at Subaru currently. But according to the brand manager, the STI spirit lives on anyway. So if you change the last letter, I don't think that would make a huge difference. Let me know your thoughts on that change in the comments below. Obviously, not only just the change to electric, but also the change of the name there. But regardless of what your thoughts are on it here and how we all feel about it, it appears that whatever's happening is still going to be a little ways off still, a little bit far out there, with him saying that due to tariffs, Subaru right now is concerned about keeping volumes up in the future, and that it's a very difficult moment, but once things get settled, we can afford the luxury of looking for that new Halo model and please that very important subset of our customers. So there you have it. No new performance stuff, it sounds like, from Subaru, at least as far as the European brand manager is concerned. Again, maybe we'll get some other stuff here in the US, but as far as Europe goes, they're not getting anything here. And so this means potentially the sportiest new thing we have from Subaru that we'll have for a while here is just the Trail Seeker, which I just, again, covered this week in New York, with 375 horsepower and a 4.4 seconds 0 to 60 on that one, in something that basically is like an electric Outback. So nothing super sporty, but it will be fast at least. And yes, again, watch that video if you haven't yet. But for some better news here this week, Mazda's general manager of the design division here talked with Road and Track recently about the next-gen Miata, and they were surprisingly open about the direction of Miata and how they're heading with it. And so first, they say it'll be getting lighter with the goal to be under 1,000 kilograms, which means about 2,205 pounds. And in Japan, there's already one version that is just barely under that, but that's with the smaller 1.5 liter engine that they get over there. So, getting it with, larger engines and stuff, it's going to be, quite the feat. But they opened up the possibility of it also getting slightly larger, saying the new one will be under 157 inches, and the current one is 154.1. So it could grow by just under 3 inches potentially. Maybe they'll do more, maybe they'll do less. We'll have to see. But if it does grow, that could be a nice touch just to maybe fit people that are a slight bit taller. Can maybe squeeze in a little bit better, depending on, again, if they decide to grow it at all. We'll see. But another thing they revealed, though, is that it'll be getting the new Skyactiv Z engine that I've been reporting on recently here, where it's this 2.5-liter naturally aspirated engine that's going to be getting a huge boost in efficiency. It'll pass all the newest emissions regulations in Europe and all that, but will retain the same power as the old motor, which would have lost power if they had to equip it with all the restrictive stuff for the emissions regulations in Europe there. So that should mean that Miata tuning might be different, but we'll probably end up something close to 200 horsepower, which, is going to be fine, especially if there's a weight loss. Have it lighter and slightly more powerful. That's a nice evolution, so that would be great. And for more good news, they say that it'll continue to be offered with a manual transmission, which is fantastic to hear that. But the only thing that's not super exciting is the fact that you shouldn't expect this anytime soon. So, Mazda recently revealed that Skyactiv Z engine is going to make its debut in late 2027, first in the new CX-5. So if this Miata is getting this engine and the engine's not showing up till basically 2028, don't look for a new Miata until sometime in 2028 or later possibly. So ND3 is going to have several years to live on here. We got that last year, and this means that it's going to live at least 4 more years until we get an actual new version, most likely. So anyway, great to hear the direction they're headed in with it, and it sounds very promising. For some more good news from Mazda very briefly here, also courtesy of Road and Track, Mazda's CEO revealed that the two-rotor, rotary engine setup is almost ready, and that if we see a good business case, we're ready to go with that engine. And this is a pretty big, deal. And obviously, they've been talking about how they want to put it in something sporty. This is different than just the single-rotor range extender that they have currently in like the MX-30 in Europe. This, would be, could be still there's talk of the STI Iconic concept just having electric motors, but having the rotary engine to power those electric motors. So this still could be incorporated into something like that, or it could be some kind of standalone thing as well. We'll have to wait and see. But apparently this new rotor, two-rotor setup is fuel efficient enough to pass, again, these tough emissions regulations and all that. And so, we'll see if it makes it into a production version of that iconic SP concept. It really, I guess, comes down to whether they can make that business case for it. And, I don't know how Mazda's been making the business cases they have been making. They seem to have more lenient accountants than everyone else in the automotive industry with approving a rear-wheel drive-based, longitudinal engine platform, a new inline 6 turbo, all these crazy things. So, I don't know. But, Mazda's done what I thought would be impossible already. So, really, I think anything's possible at this point for Mazda. So, we'll see what happens and keep our fingers crossed. One vehicle that sadly has had its business case ruined by the tariffs here is the Mini Aceman. So it was a new model that came out about a year ago that was somewhat replacing the Clubman in the lineup, but due to it being built in China and also being electric, Mini wasn't able to justify building it in England or the US. So that means that it would be killed. Initially, it was just not going to come because of the Biden Chinese EV tariffs of, if it's built in China and it's electric, then, there was a 100% tariff already last year. And then, now if they were even to do a gas version that's built in China, that couldn't come over either due to the tariff. So it sounds like Aceman is completely dead in the water. Not going to happen here, unfortunately. So that's the first development. But in an interview with Automotive News here that they did with Mini's VP of the Americas, they are considering a new gas-powered crossover instead, for the American market, I suppose. But they didn't provide any specifics of that idea. But during the interview, we did get a few more tidbits of info about Mini's future as well in general. So the electric Cooper and the potential convertible version that were also in the cards, the electric Mini going around other parts of the world. We don't get it here in the States, again, because of it being built in China, and that, again, due to last year's tariffs. But because of the hurdles of that and the realization that, it might take EVs longer with that whole transition over from gas to EV for many brands. They said that we're still moving in that direction of being an electric-only lineup, but we've seen, particularly in North America, ICE is still very much a thing, and will be for the foreseeable future. So we have changed a bit of our approach as a brand and going to build ICE longer, adding that you'll see investment in new ICE products. We're going to continue to make sure we're building products for those customers. So they originally had a goal of going all electric in 2030, and so I think this is suggesting that that's out the window now, and follows many other brands that are kind of conceding the same thing. And he also teased the idea of a true Mini making a return, which seems like an odd thing for an executive from Mini to say. Why aren't they all true Minis? But it sounds like maybe the suggestion of something smaller than even the Cooper eventually could come back, depending on how they try and make the business case for that. But maybe sometime in the 2030s, if, we can have, more EVs and don't have tariffs, maybe they could do some kind of super low cost thing and, do a Fiat 500e kind of thing, something like that. We'll have to see. But, yeah, in the short term, though, it sounds like, we're going to be getting basically what we have from Mini and nothing else really new. So anyway, interesting to hear that. And Ford sounds like they're planning to use the ST and RS names on some new EVs in the future, potentially, which I know is going to upset all the enthusiasts. Another example of Ford especially just taking badges and doing questionable things with them. But anyway, so Ford of Europe's product marketing chief told Autocar recently that they would love an ST or RS variant of their EVs. And so in Europe, that'll first take the form of an electric Puma ST, with the gas-powered one already offered with the ST badge. And so there is this new Gen E version of the Puma that's electric that just debuted last year. And that a sportier version of that is definitely coming, if not in this model, but the model after. So obviously we don't get the Puma in the States. Maybe we will someday, or maybe the next gen or something. But in the meantime, we're not getting that. So this isn't applying to us directly. But, it shows Ford's openness, at least Ford of Europe, to, putting the ST badge and even RS badges on their electric vehicles. And I hope that, again, the performance is insane, especially for the RS one, so that they actually earn that badge. But anyway, yeah, very interesting to, see that. I guess these days I'm kind of callous anyway, because, after Mustang and all these other, misappropriations of names, it is what it is. But, just crazy that ST and RS will be on the back of EVs eventually as well. Audi this week has also revealed the sedan version of the A6 after showing off the Avant a few weeks ago. So predictably, the only thing that's changed is the back end, with the A6 sticking with the traditional sedan setup here, having a trunk and not the lift back like the A5 has. That trunk is 17.37 cubic feet, by the way. And thankfully, all these new gas-powered Audis have real exhaust tips now, and overall, I think it looks really nice. Let me know what you think in the comments below. But it's 2.3 inches longer than the old one, so it may even be slightly more spacious inside. We'll have to see about that. But speaking of the interior, it's the same as the Avant and pretty much every other new Audi, with the one big curved display and the optional passenger display that's uncohesively included, in my opinion. It's also quieter inside, with a 30% increase in sound insulation, they say. And as far as the mechanicals go, it's of course the same as the Avant, and we only have info on the regular gas version so far, with a plug-in hybrid likely coming soon after. But for now, there's a 2-liter Turbo 4 that in Europe does just 201 horsepower and 250 pound-feet of torque and drives just the front wheels. The other extreme is the 3-liter Turbo V6 with Quattro that does 362 horsepower and 406 pound-feet of torque, along with a 4.7 second 0 to 62 mile per hour time. And the happy medium in Europe is the diesel that also does only 201 horsepower, but does get more torque at 295 pound-feet. And that one can be paired with either front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. And of course, there's also going to be the S version coming down the road, most likely RS versions too. But for the regular A6 here, there's also options like a sportier rear diff, rear-wheel steering, and adaptive air suspension for those who want, the better handling and or a smoother ride in their A6. And it'll start arriving in Germany at the equivalent of $63,000 and begin arriving there this summer. And we'll get it, sometime after that here, assuming Audi begins shipping and importing vehicles to the States once again, because that is currently paused and stuff is starting to pile up at the ports, and we will see. So, there's going to be a backlog as a result of that already. Whether that backlog gets resolved quickly or takes a while will depend on how long these tariffs stick around. But, it might be a while before we end up actually getting this A6 here in the States, as well as basically all the other new Audis that have come out in the past few months. So anyway, we'll have to stay tuned on that. And another new luxury sedan is coming soon here, the next generation Lexus ES. So it'll debut on April 23rd. It's been revealed at the Auto Shanghai show, and that's due to Chinese buyers still being the biggest sedan buyers on the planet. But like Camry, this will likely, get some elements from the old one and some elements from, that are all new here. So with Camry, we didn't have any dimensional changes really. Interior space was the same. So I would expect the ES to most likely do the same thing and have, no differences as far as sizing or spacing for the new ES. We'll have to see. Maybe they will do more, but as far as, what we do know here, there are some short teaser videos on YouTube that show off very bold styling and even a charge port on the fender, which is an unexpected development here. So that suggests that at least the Chinese market will get a plug-in hybrid version of the ES. And obviously we know about all the what were formerly called prime versions of the Toyotas and, the Lexus plug-in hybrids that now are just called plug-in hybrid. There's no Camry plug-in hybrid yet. And so maybe the ES debuts this, and hopefully we get this in the States, and then it trickles down maybe eventually someday to the Camry. Especially, I'd love to see this as a new Camry TRD if they give it prime treatment, 300 horsepower from a plug-in hybrid. Electrify it. If they can't bring back the V6, I think that's a nice compromise and gives you some really impressive performance. We'll have to wait and see. But anyway, exciting little development there, and Lexus formally says that you can also expect a further evolution of the hallmark quietness and ride comfort that you're used to with the ES. So sounds good, and I'll cover it all here next week. Another sedan that we know now will be debuting in July is the Hyundai IONIQ 6N. We saw the first teaser a couple of weeks ago, and now Hyundai's Instagram has teased another shot of the back end here, along with revealing that it's going to, again, come out in July. They didn't say exactly when in July yet, but I can't wait. Going to be one of the, in my opinion, one of the probably most epic cars of the year, just with, how good the IONIQ 5N was. So very excited for this. Can't wait. Also, Ram CEO Tim Kuniskis is teasing new Ram products here that are on the horizon, saying on LinkedIn that there are 25 product announcements planned within the next 18 months, and it all starts June 8th, which strangely enough is a Sunday. So I'm not sure if there's some kind of race or event or something for that, as far as why it's being announced on a Sunday. But anyway, Ram does do a lot of special editions, and I would assume that the majority of these announcements are, a new paint and sticker package kind of thing. But there should be some real, actual product announcements as well in the mix here. Likely the return of several V8 Rams like we've been hearing, most likely, TRX returning, if they are, actually restarting this, all these V8 productions here, moving the production here up to America, then you're going to see a bunch of those, obviously, and also most likely still finally going to see an announcement about the long-awaited new Dakota, or whatever they're going to call the new mid-sized Ram. That's probably going to land sometime in the next 18 months, maybe closer to the end of that time period, but should probably get that. So, there's going to be some real stuff here as well. Maybe there's going to be 25 actual new vehicles, but for a brand that has, 2 pickup trucks and then a bunch of work commercial vans, I, doubt it. But anyway, very interesting, and looking forward to seeing the new stuff that's coming here. Speaking of special editions from Stellantis, though, Jeep this week has revealed the Wagoneer Overland Special Edition, which doesn't look too different, but gives the Wagoneer a bit of off-road capability. So it gets 32-inch all-terrain tires on 20-inch wheels, an electronic limited slip diff, a 2-speed transfer case, and 3 steel skid plates on the front axle, transfer case, and gas tank. And also gets the air suspension coming standard here, and so that gives you the ability to raise it to give you up to 10 inches of ground clearance. There's also a new rock drive mode, and there's tow hooks, black roof and trim, and Napa leather, and a panoramic roof for the interior there. And for some reason, they're limiting production of this to just 2,000 units. Maybe it's 2,000 per year, or that's just all they think they can sell. But, I'm guessing there's probably more than 2,000 people out there that would want something like this. I don't know. The package also only costs $5,795, which actually seems fairly reasonable, especially for, Jeep, pricing. So, I mean, I feel like that would do more than 2,000 units. But anyway, it brings the final MSRP of these up to $74,835, including destination. And then those are going to begin arriving at dealers here later this summer. So cool to see that. And we have a few follow-up stories on things that I've reported on in the past few weeks here, a few rumors that have been squashed here. So first is that despite the recent rumors that have reignited and resurfaced about Maserati possibly getting sold off, Reuters is reporting that Maserati's CEO told a trade union representing Italian metalworkers this week that Stellantis confirms its commitment towards Italy, its workers, and all its brands, including Maserati, and said that the United States remain a strategic market for Maserati. So, I mean, great to hear. I question the justification here, considering, Maserati's struggles here in the States and Stellantis' struggles in general, but it sounds like, according to this, no matter how bad stuff gets for Maserati, especially in the United States, and no matter how bad tariffs get, they're going to keep on shipping over Maseratis. I mean, Maserati, they can potentially justify just padding the asking price with the extra 25% if need be. But also this CEO is also the person running Alfa Romeo right now. And I'm assuming he's sharing the same sentiment for Alfa as well. So, I don't know. We will see. But I mean, it gets to a point where if you have such low sales, I know that, Fiat is a big moneymaker for them in Europe. And, they do bring in a ton of money, sell a ton of cars. But, doing things like this, if they are things that are a drag on the company, sure, it might be a pride thing. It might be, a halo effect, or I don't know, what justifications they're using, but it just seems like it's not a smart business decision if these brands are not putting up the numbers you need them to put up. I guess they have a real strong faith in the future of these brands. I'd like to as well, but it's just, it's interesting that it sounds like they're still just like, no, we're not selling Maserati. No, we're not, doing anything. They even squashed rumors of merging Alfa Romeo and Maserati or anything like that. It's just like they are just continuing with business as normal. Everything's fine. And I guess we'll see how long that lasts, and hopefully, it sees them through to the other side of these struggles. But anyway, very interesting to hear that. Another rumor that got squashed here this week was the recent one from Autocar suggesting that the Audi R8 could make a return. Again, sharing, according to the report or the rumor, that would share obviously a bunch of the stuff with the Lamborghini Temerario, and just, make an Audi version of that. And so this week, though, at the New York Auto Show here, Volkswagen Group of America's new CEO told journalists that in regards to the R8 rumor, they said that it's a product portfolio discussion. What's viable in the market? A mid-engine internal combustion engine vehicle, I don't see that on the roadmap. Now, this isn't the CEO of all of Volkswagen, but I would assume that this guy probably has seen the plans globally, and, obviously, if they were to sell an R8, they would sell it in America, so he would be involved in this discussion. So if he says it's not on the roadmap, sounds like it's not on the roadmap. So no new R8, it sounds like. So if you want to have a new R8, you have to either settle for an old one that's in pristine shape or put some Audi badges on your Temerario. Those are going to be your two options, it seems. But anyway, interesting to get that clarification there. And last week I talked about how Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche, Lotus, Jaguar, and Land Rover have all paused shipments to the U.S. due to the tariffs. That continues to hold because nothing has changed as far as the tariff situation here. They're continuing to be in effect, and as a result, crippling these imports of vehicles here. And so this week we can add Mitsubishi to the list of casualties as well as far as importing stuff. So they told Automotive News last Friday that we are holding vehicles at the port until we have additional visibility on tariffs and decisions made on next steps. And like I've been saying, sorry to be a broken record, but for anyone who hasn't been following every weekly update, I've been saying how Mitsubishi could be one of the first companies to drop out of the United States just because, again, very weak product portfolio that essentially consists of Outlander and then a bunch of super old, outdated stuff. And so they sold over 100,000 Mitsubishis here last year still. So we're not talking about some tiny amount of sales, but, considering Mitsubishi's struggles globally as far as the automotive division, and again, the lack of investment here in the States that has allowed all these products to languish and die on the vine here, it just doesn't look great. And then to weather something like this, especially with Mitsubishi having zero manufacturing in the States, nothing. So they got to import everything in. And that's it's going to put them at a disadvantage. And so it makes sense that, they are pausing everything at the port to, wait it out. They also do have, to their credit, over 20,000 new Mitsubishis sitting on dealer lots currently already. And Mitsubishi also recently reduced their incentives to further slow down and preserve that last 20,000, units that they have here in the States. And, I guess they're going to sell through those a little slowly just in the effort to try to make that last as long as possible, to either wait out the tariffs until either they, get resolved or dropped or some kind of deal gets made, or at the very least just to, limit the damage here and, maximize profit on the last 20,000 Mitsubishis potentially to come into the States. Again, that's just me and my conjecture, but, maximize the last bit of profit here before, that maybe is lights out for Mitsubishi here in the States. We'll have to see. And it's just, everyone's playing this differently. Ford, for example, is playing it the exact opposite. They're ramping up incentives and they're rushing stuff out the door. Maybe they're fearful people are going to have less money to spend in a few months and might as well strike while you can, get these cars out the door and, make your money while you can here. And also Ford is better insulated. They do have a bunch of production here in the States. So even if they have to lose the non-US models or something, they can at least continue on and still sell stuff, unlike Mitsubishi that literally has nothing. And their choices are either, preserving the stuff they have already in the States or, paying them the 25% here. So we'll see, whose tactic plays out the best and, see what ends up happening here. But, crazy to see that. And speaking of the tariffs here, it does seem like they will in fact stick around. There's been nothing that's changed in the past week. They are in effect and currently, again, crippling these imports and all that. And so the only possible exemption or concession here that Trump talked about this week was the idea of giving tariff exemptions for auto parts, which are supposed to be starting next month. I think that starts like May 2nd or something for the auto parts. Right now, the tariffs are only on imported cars, not parts. Parts start up next month. And so when asked about tariffs and how they're affecting the auto industry, on Monday, Trump told reporters that I'm looking at something to help car companies with it, and that they're switching to parts that were made in Canada, Mexico, and other places, and they need a little bit of time because they're going to make them here. And I just have to do a little bit of fact checking here. There's maybe private discussions happening behind closed doors with these car companies about maybe moving some suppliers to the States. Maybe some of that's actually going to happen. But I also think a lot of this is probably just to pacify Trump. And even if these executives are telling him that, I don't think they intend on moving suppliers to the States, or even if they do some, they're definitely not going to do all of it. It's just completely unrealistic to bring all of your suppliers into the States. It's just, it cannot happen. So taking his statement at face value there, if he's talking in absolutes here about making them in China, making them here in America, that's not going to happen. So, we'll see again how this all plays out. But I think, whether he realizes this or not, I think the way the car companies are actually going to be playing this here is that, in my opinion, their car companies are going to take this deal essentially of having parts be exempted and, still leaving on the other tariffs for imported completed vehicles. And so, especially if the main companies that are discussing this stuff are the big three American companies, they have manufacturing here in the States for a lot of vehicles. And so if they, this is something they can potentially work around, still a bloodbath, but a bloodbath they can work with of, okay, we just optimize our current factories here in the States to build our highest volume sellers we possibly can. And then we just, do that until Trump's out. And then, they can go back to, resuming the way things used to be, because I think that's really, everyone's just still in this holding pattern. And I think this is the safest thing to do without, losing a bunch of money on a bunch of investments that go nowhere with factories that can't be built fast enough and, filling these factories with, workers that are non-existent because not everyone wants to work factory jobs and everything. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, and maybe, this means, again, that those car companies that don't have any manufacturing in the States, like Mitsubishi, will end up, falling by the wayside. It also means companies like Nissan could really profit, because like Nissan actually said this past week, they see kind of an opportunity with tariffs, because they have actually a ton of American manufacturing. All of their biggest products are already built in America. And especially like for them, if the parts don't get tariffed, they're golden. Because again, the high majority of everything is built in the States. And so if Nissan has basically no tariffs, that gives them a huge advantage over basically everybody. I think they have more American manufacturing as far as product portfolio compared to any other Japanese car companies. And this could be a huge windfall that Nissan desperately needs. So, I mean, it might work out better for some than others, but at the end of the day, again, we're talking about prices most likely going up regardless for, most other stuff. And, we'll see how it all plays out. But again, very interesting to see how this continues to evolve with this story. And for the last news story here this week, the car that we lost from the U.S. Due to tariffs partially last week was the Volvo S90. And just this week, it got a refresh, which kills the whole rebuttal that I was getting last week that, S90 was going to be going away anyway. It's not due to the tariffs. No, it was going to stick around, and it has a refresh here that we see. So it wasn't going to be discontinued. And in other markets, it'll continue to live on, just like the aging XC60 and XC90s that also got their own little refreshes recently. But Volvo did tell Motor One that it also won't be offered in Europe anymore either for this refresh. And that's despite there, of course, being no tariff issues with the EU. And so, this means that this is probably a combination of factors as far as why it's leaving Europe as well. This means that it is also due to probably low sales, lower demand. In the States here, I think obviously, again, I guess sold over 1,000. They sold 1,100 S90s last year. So certainly low sales is part of it. But I think, the tariffs did accelerate that decision making. And instead of, maybe seeing it through for a few more months of production or however long it was, it just got killed faster. And so, it is what it is, but it's just sad because now we can add this to the list of awesome sedans that are only available in China now. But for China, and they say it'll continue in China, and also it's going to be sold in a small number of other key Asian markets. So those Asian markets will get the changes you see here of a new grille, headlights, taillights, wheels, and a bigger touchscreen on the inside. And it continues to look really nice. I think actually those taillights are a bigger change than the other Volvo refreshes. And I think it's actually a very nice little refresh there for the S90. And just a shame we won't get it here anymore in the States. But lastly, I want to thank all of you that are members of the Matt Maran Motoring Club. So we did have one new member that was able to join here this past week, along with many others that were able to rejoin, thanks to the very generous membership gifting that was done this last week in the live stream by Grand Admiral Thrawn and Kyle. So thank you both so much for your continued generosity every single week. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure all those members that continue to be able to be members, and those new ones as well, all really appreciate your generosity as well. So thank you both. And I also want to give a big welcome here to the new member. His name or username is Smoke14Ya. So I hope you're enjoying the membership perks so far. I look forward to chatting with you and everyone else that can make it to Sunday's live stream, where those members always do get that priority answering. And if you'd also like that priority answering, as well as all the other perks that come with being a member, there's always join buttons here on the video page, on the channel page, and a link in the description. But anyway, thank you all very much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. Be sure to, again, go back and watch that New York Auto Show playlist if you haven't yet, to get caught up on all the other debuts here this week. And yeah, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.